Chapter 1. The striped wallpaper, the village of Little Farnborough, lay hushed beneath an early autumn mist. Green hedgerows, trimmed with earnest precision, flanked the narrow lane that led to Sedberry House, a modest manor distinguished only by its peeling cream facade, and most notably, the curious striped wallpaper that adorned every room along its upper corridor. To Hercule Poirot, aboard the 9:45 from Victoria, and ensconced in a compartment lined with plush burgundy velvet, that wallpaper presented a puzzle as irresistible as a half-finished crossword. Mon ami Hastings, Poirot began, smoothing his impeccably waxed mustaches. Observe how the stripes alternate between a pale jade and a deeper emerald. There is something almost hypnotic in their uniformity. It is as though the very walls seek to conceal, rather than reveal. Captain Arthur Hastings, notebook perched on his knee, nodded. You think there's significance in the decoration itself? Tout à fait. Poirot's gray eyes sparkled. In mysteries, the smallest detail may harbor the greatest secret. We go to Sedberry House at the invitation of Mrs. Emily Pendlebury, a client most distressed. But I confess I am equally intrigued by this inartful yet compelling wallpaper. Hastings jotted down the phrase striped wallpaper with a flourish. Mrs. Pendlebury's letter mentioned odd noises, footsteps pacing the corridor at night, though the house is occupied only by herself, her cook, and a young maid. She fears. What, exactly? A presence, Poirot replied, lips curved, in a subtle smile. Nous verrons. But first, Hastings, let us prepare ourselves properly. A detective must arrive fit for any eventuality, emotional, intellectual, or perhaps even literal. That evening, as the cab rattled along the gravel drive, and the headlamps illuminated tall oaks dripping with dew, Poirot's keen senses absorbed every nuance. The baldachin of trees arched overhead, casting shifting shadows that danced upon the wall's shadows that seemed to play with the stripes, making them pulse. From the cab's window, Hastings glimpsed the distant glow of lamplit. Windows framed with dusty lace curtains. You feel it too, Hastings? Auguste Poirot's thin hand touched Hastings's arm. There is an atmosphere here, n'est-ce pas? A tension, like a taut string ready to snap. Indeed, Hastings said, disembarking with his valise. I've seldom felt such anticipation at a country house. One expects comfort and good dinner when invited to the countryside. Poirot's gaze flicked upward to the eaves. But comfort, mon ami, is sometimes the greatest disguise. They were greeted by Mrs. Pendlebury in the via. Oak-paneled vestibule, her face pale and lips quivering. She wore a simple woolen dress, its high collar buttoned tightly, as though shielding herself from both cold and dread. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, she said, voice hushed. Thank you for coming. I scarcely know what to expect. The noises began 3 nights ago. Echoes, footsteps, a low whisper, if I may call it so. Have you seen anything, madame? Poirot asked gently. She shook her head. Only the stripes. They seemed to warp before my eyes. I could swear. Last night, the green stripes shifted to a bluish tint, and the pattern changed, though nothing in the room moved. Poirot inclined his head, fingertips pressed together in thought. And the maid? Any such experience? She is new, Mrs. Pendlebury confessed. I have yet to question her thoroughly. She sleeps at the opposite end of the corridor, but she too complained of restless dreams. At that moment, the young cook, Mrs. Francis, bustled in carrying a tea tray. Her rosy cheeks and brisk manner contrasted sharply with her employer's. Anxiety? Tea, sir? And biscuits? We are rather behind with supper, if you will forgive me. Thank you, madame, Poirot said kindly. He accepted a cup, raising it to his lips while scanning the room. The wallpaper soared to a corniced ceiling, every panel identical save one. Hastings brushed his notebook. Which panel differs? Poirot? Poirot's gaze narrowed. Ah, you see? At the far end, near the window, a single stripe appears slightly narrower, but only if one views it from this angle. Remarkable, Hastings murmured. Mais oui, Poirot smiled. The game is afoot, Hastings. Tomorrow we shall examine the corridor by daylight. Tonight, however, we must eat, rest, and prepare our little gray cells. Mrs. Pendlebury managed a faint smile, relief flickering in her eyes. Poirot rose, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Fear nothing, madame. With patience and method, we shall unravel this affair-striped wallpaper and all. And so, after tea and a simple supper laid out in the grand but somber dining room, the detective retired to his suite. Through the corridor's open door, the jade and emerald stripes shimmered in the lamplight, and somewhere beyond, footsteps stirred. But beneath those restless patterns, Poirot's calm determination glowed brighter than any wallpaper could conceal. 2. A corridor of shadows early morning. Sunlight filtered through mist-laden oaks as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings reassembled in the oak-paneled vestibule. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew-drenched leaves. Mrs. Pendlebury, looking steadier than the night before, ushered them toward the upper corridor, the notorious vantage of the striped wallpaper. Observe Hastings, Poirot murmured, pausing beneath the low glow of a morning lamp. The light is different now. We can study the stripes without the distortions of lamplight or the caprice of our imaginations. Hastings, notebook in hand, glanced along the corridor's length. The wallpaper's contrasting jade and emerald bands marched and regimented. Order, save for the single narrow stripe Poirot had noted. He already felt the same prickling anticipation. They advanced slowly, Poirot's gaze sweeping every inch. At the far end, the narrow stripe held its secret once more. Yet as Hastings stepped forward, he perceived something else. A faint seam, almost imperceptible, running vertically between two panels. Mon Dieu, Poirot, Hastings exclaimed softly. There's a join here, as though one panel replaced another, yet the pattern matches perfectly. How could that be? Poirot placed a gloved finger upon the seam. Precisely why section, Hastings? Someone has taken great pains to conceal an alteration. But why? And what hides behind? As they studied the join, the soft titter of footsteps echoed from the corridor behind them. Mrs. Francis, the cook, appeared carrying a small wooden ladder and a taper lantern. Begging your pardon, sir, she said to Poirot, but I thought you might need this. She set the ladder beneath the narrow stripe and handed Poirot the lantern. I found it in the storeroom. It belonged to Mr. Aldridge, the former caretaker. He left in a hurry, but I kept his things. Poirot inclined his head appreciatively. Merci, madame. Your vigilance is most helpful. Once the ladder was in place, Poirot climbed and held the lantern close to the seam. The panel's texture was slightly uneven, a clue in itself. He pressed a fingertip against the outer edge. With a faint click, the panel yielded, swinging. Inward on hidden pivots. Voila! Poirot announced, stepping down and dusting his hands. A secret recess. But what purpose does it serve? Behind the panel lay a narrow alcove, no more than 2 feet deep. In the muted dawn light, it revealed a slim shelf bearing an ornate silver snuff-box, encrusted with green enamel that matched the wallpaper's darker hue. Beside it lay a faded photograph. A young woman in Edwardian dress, her gaze solemn as. She clutched a letter sealed with a wax crest. Hastings picked up the photograph gingerly. Who is she, I wonder? And why hide her image here? Poirot studied the snuff-box. It is of high craftsmanship, perhaps a gift from someone of significance. Notice the inscription inside the lid. He clicked open the snuff-box. Within, a script in delicate calligraphy. To my dearest Eleanor, forever hidden, forever ours. Poirot's brow arched. "Eleanor," Hastings repeated. "But Mrs. Pendlebury's name is Emily." "Indeed, Hastings." "Which suggests another name was once far more important to this house. A hidden liaison, perhaps. But the corridor's disturbances at night, the footsteps, the whisper, could be linked to these secrets." They replaced the panel, and Poirot secured it, ensuring the scene remained invisible. Mrs. Francis, wide-eyed, assisted. "Should I tell Mrs. Pendlebury?" The cook asked. "Not until we have fully considered its implications," Poirot advised. "She must not yet know of this discovery, lest she become anxious again. Captain Hastings, let us examine these items in privacy." Later, seated at a small writing table in Poirot's suite, the detective laid out the snuff-box and photograph under a bright desk lamp. Hastings removed the letter from the photograph's frame. It bore the same wax seal. Unrolling it revealed elegant script. "My dearest Eleanor, should fortune separate us, know that the walls themselves shall guard our love. Trust only in what the stripes conceal." Hastings looked up. A secret love, hidden behind wallpaper. No wonder the house unsettles its mistress. Poirot nodded, tapping the letter. Yet if Emily Pendlebury is not Eleanor, then she is either hiding her true identity or unaware of this romance. And the caretaker's sudden departure suggests someone else discovered the hiding place and removed him from the equation. A knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Pendlebury entered, bearing a tray of fresh scones. "Monsieur, Captain, I did not wish to disturb you," she apologized, "but breakfast is ready." Poirot closed the letter and slipped it into his waistcoat pocket. "Excellent, madame. We shall join you momentarily. In the meantime, Hastings and I must discuss certain historical curiosities." She curtsied and withdrew. As the door closed, Hastings leaned toward Poirot. Might Mrs. Pendlebury be the Eleanor of the letter, hiding her past? "Possibly," Poirot agreed, "or she may be entirely innocent of this affair. Our next step will be to question the household, Mrs. Francis, the maid, and especially Mrs. Pendlebury herself once. She is ready. For now, Hastings, let us take our breakfast with discreet appetites, while the walls of Sudbury House hold their breath." Freshly scones and the promise of answers ahead, they prepared to confront the living secrets of Sudbury's striped corridor, knowing that every step would bring them closer to the truth concealed within its patterned embrace. Chapter 3. Footsteps. In the dark after breakfast, the air in Sudbury House held a nervous energy. Mrs. Pendlebury, now composed beneath her morning composure, led Poirot and Hastings into the snug morning room, where cups of strong tea steamed upon a lace-draped table. Sunlight filtered through the tall mullioned windows, illuminating the quiet determination on Poirot's face. "Madame," Poirot began, "we thank you for your hospitality. This morning, we hope to learn more about the house's inhabitants. Your cook, Mrs. Francis, and your maid, Miss Turner, have both mentioned uneasy dreams and strange noises. We wish to question them individually, in private." Mrs. Pendlebury inclined her head. "Of course. I will summon them at once." Moments later, Mrs. Francis entered first. She was a stout woman with a rosy visage and an earnest manner. Poirot offered her a reassuring smile before speaking. "Madame Francis, you have been most helpful," he said, folding his hands. "I wonder if you could tell me more about the late caretaker, Mr. Aldrich. You found his ladder, yes?" The cook's face clouded. "Yes, monsieur. Mr. Aldrich left in haste 2 nights ago. He claimed family illness required his departure, but he barely spoke to me. I found his ladder and lantern in the broom cupboard. I thought you might need them." Poirot nodded, eyes bright. "And before he left, did you notice any strange occurrences? Objects moved, locked doors open, or peculiar sounds?" She shook her head. "Nothing, monsieur. Only that the mistress looked more alarmed each night." Poirot's gaze softened. "Thank you, Madame Francis. Your vigilance is invaluable." As she departed, Hastings whispered, "She seems truthful." "Enough, but she knows less than we hoped." "Patience, Hastings," Poirot replied. "We shall see what Miss Turner reveals." When the maid arrived, a slender young woman with wide gray eyes, Poirot invited her to sit. He placed a small notebook and pen on the table, then leaned forward kindly. "Miss Turner, you have complained of restless dreams. Tell me, what did you dream?" The girl swallowed. I dreamed of footsteps pacing outside my door, monsieur. Soft at first, then heavy, as though carrying something. And once, a whisper that said, 'Find me.'" Hastings scribbled furiously. Poirot's mustaches quivered. "And did you see who made those footsteps?" Miss Turner shook her head. "No, sir. I dared not open the door." "Very good," Poirot said. "One more question. Have you ever encountered the photograph we found, the one of Eleanor?" Her cheeks paled. "No, sir. I have never seen it." "Merci, mademoiselle." Poirot closed his notebook. "Your honesty is appreciated." As she left, he turned to Hastings. There is sincerity in her eyes, but notice, it is fear that guides her truth. He rose and smoothed his waistcoat. "Hastings, we must now inspect the corridor at night ourselves. The footsteps, the secrets, they will reveal themselves under darkness." That afternoon, as Mrs. Pendlebury took a rest, Poirot and Hastings prepared for their vigil. Armed with the silver snuff-box and the letter, Poirot wrapped them carefully in a cloth. Hastings checked his pocket watch and lit a small lantern. "Behold, Hastings," Poirot said, handing him the lantern. "We shall patrol the upper corridor, unseen and unheard. I wish to test whether the disturbances continue in our presence." As dusk fell, the household retired. Mrs. Pendlebury's suite was silent. The cook and maid each withdrew to their quarters. Poirot and Hastings hid behind a broad oak screen at the staircase landing. From here, they could observe both ends of the corridor without being detected. Minutes passed in tense silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock below reached their ears. Then softly at first a footstep sounded on the polished floorboards above. Monotonous, deliberate, pacing toward them. "Listen," whispered Poirot, finger to lips. "Someone walks." The footstep paused just beyond the screen. A shadow passed beneath the crack of moonlit glass. The pacing resumed, slow and thoughtful, moving away. Poirot's eyes glowed. Note the rhythm. It is not the hurried tread of panic, but the measured step of someone accustomed to secrecy. They waited until the footsteps faded down the corridor. Then, with utmost care, Poirot climbed the stairs, Hastings at his heels. At the spot where the footsteps paused stood a single leather slipper, its toe turned inward as though left in haste. Hastings knelt to examine it. One shoe, and no trace of the other. Poirot retrieved a handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped. The slipper. A clue, Hastings. Our mysterious night walker has lost a slipper. But whose? And why left behind? Should we show it to Mrs. Pendlebury? Hastings asked. Not yet, Poirot said, rising. We will question her again in the morning. For tonight, let us hide this evidence and consider our next move. This slipper may unlock the identity of our corridor wanderer. They retreated to Poirot's suite, heartbeats still racing from the encounter. As they replaced the slipper beneath a cushion, Poirot mused aloud. The walls of Sedbury House whisper many secrets, but now they speak in footsteps and leave behind the slipper of truth. Hastings, rousing a cup of late-night tea, asked softly, Do you think Mrs. Pendlebury knows more than she admits? Possibly, Poirot replied, cradling his cup. But only when the slipper's owner is revealed will the ghost of Eleanor emerge from the shadows. And so, under the hush of midnight, the pair awaited the dawn, knowing that at Sedbury House every lost slipper, Every silent whisper carried the weight of a hidden past. Chapter 4. Secrets beneath the stripes. Night had scarcely loosened its grip when Hercule Poirot awoke with a tickle of inspiration. The memory of the single leather slipper, tucked beneath a cushion in his suite, pulsed in his mind like a hidden heartbeat. He roused Captain Hastings with a discreet tap at the door. "Mon ami, the time has come to compare heel to history," Poirot whispered. "We must learn whose foot once graced that slipper." Hastings, rubbing sleep from his eyes, nodded. Overhead, the moonlight slanted through the window, casting silver stripes across the carpet like a continuation of Sedberry House's secret pattern. Poirot dressed swiftly, waistcoat, cravat, starched collar all, before Hastings had tied his boots. Descended to Mrs. Pendlebury's morning room, where the slipper lay in the palm of Poirot's gloved hand. The house was silent, except for the soft ticking of a clock. Poirot arranged the slipper on the table beside a sheet of blotting paper. "First," he said, "we must know whose foot shape this matches." He retrieved a small leather tape measure from his case. Hastings watched in fascination as Poirot noted the length, the curve of instep, the wear on the sole. 7 inches and a quarter, with a slight outward turn, Poirot observed. "This is not the foot of a slender young woman, nor the broad step of Mrs. Francis. It belongs, if I am not mistaken, to someone of lithe yet assured gait, one accustomed to long corridors." Hastings frowned. "Miss Turner, perhaps." "But she said nothing of losing a shoe." "Precisely why we investigate, Hastings." Poirot folded the tape and tucked it away. "Now, we must consult those who knew the late Mr. Aldridge's habits. If he discovered our secret panel, he might have confronted its owner and paid the price of his silence." They left the slipper behind and made their way to the servants' quarters. The cook's door stood ajar. Within, Mrs. Francis bustled. "About scrubbing the basin. Madame Francis," Poirot began, "please forgive the hour. I require your assistance. Did Mr. Aldridge ever mention a visitor to the house whom he insisted be kept away from certain rooms?" The cook paused, dabbing at a tarnished copper kettle. "Now that you mention it, monsieur, he was always on edge. He muttered about keeping someone out of the East Wing, but Mrs. Pendlebury forbade him to speak of names." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. "East Wing, the chapel, you mean?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. That part is sealed off. Its door locked for as long as I've been here." "Merci, madame." Poirot bowed, and they withdrew. The sealed chapel lay at the extreme end of the corridor, beyond the striped panels they had examined. If someone haunted those halls, perhaps they used that room as refuge. Back in Poirot's suite, they plotted their next move. Poirot drew a quick sketch of the corridor, marking the secret panel and the chapel door. His finger tapped the ladder. "At dusk, we must gain entry to the chapel. If the night walker uses it, the slipper may have fallen there." Hastings shivered slightly. "A sealed chapel sounds like something from a ghost story." "Ah, but ghosts are often only people in disguise." Poirot smiled. That afternoon, Poirot requested Mrs. Pendlebury's company for tea. She entered the suite with wary composure, as though bracing for unwelcome questions. Poirot motioned to a chair. "Madame, I wish to discuss the history of this house. You permitted Mr. Aldridge to lock the chapel door?" She touched the armrest. "Yes, it was my grandmother's wish. She feared desecration of the old family altar. None may enter without my express consent." "Your grandmother, was she Eleanor?" Poirot's voice was gentle. Mrs. Pendlebury's eyes widened. She paled. I am not Eleanor. My name is Emily. I never met my grandmother. She died before I was born." Poirot inclined his head. "Curious. And yet the letter was addressed to my dearest Eleanor, hidden behind these very walls. It speaks of love secreted within the stripes." Tears formed in her eyes. "All I know is that my mother was adopted." I have no records of her birth. Perhaps Eleanor was my mother's name. Hastings leaned forward. Madame, do you recall any family heirlooms apart from this snuff-box? She thought, fumbling a handkerchief. A brooch, shaped like a swallow. I kept it always. But after my mother died, it vanished. Poirot's face brightened. A swallow symbol of flight, of secret journeys. I suspect the owner of the slipper is your mother's sister, Eleanor, alive in these very halls, waiting to reclaim her identity. Mrs. Pendlebury rose, trembling. But who? Where is she? Tonight, Poirot declared, we shall enter the chapel. Hastings and I will await the coroner's footstep once more. When the night walker appears, we will confront her revealing whether she is Eleanor, come home at last. As Mrs. Pendlebury watched them leave, her hands clasped the remnants of a hidden past. Above, the striped wallpaper shivered in the fading light, ready to yield more of Sudbury House's secrets to the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 5. Confrontation in the chapel dusk settled once more over Sudbury House as Poirot and Hastings readied themselves for the evening's vigil. In the lamplit hush of his suite, Poirot arranged the silver snuff-box and led her upon a small table, next to the single slipper wrapped in blotting paper. Hastings paced quietly, lantern in hand, while Poirot clasped his fingers together, eyes alight with anticipation. Patience, mon ami, Poirot murmured. The corridor will speak to us again. Tonight we hear its truth. At 8:30, they slipped from the suite and ascended to the upper corridor. The jade and emerald stripes glowed under the lantern's flicker, casting long, wavering shadows. Poirot halted near the hidden panel. First, Hastings, ensure our slipper is concealed behind this false board. When our visitor passes, she will brush against the seam, and we shall see. Hastings nodded and gently replaced the slipper within the panel's recess. Poirot tapped the board, then stepped back to stand beneath the chapel door iron-bound, its lock ancient and rusted. Here, Hastings, he said, we watch both ends. Prepare yourself. They stationed themselves behind the oak screen. Minutes stretched, punctuated only by the distant ticking of clocks and the low sigh of settling timbers. Then softly, unmistakably a footfall sounded at the far end of the corridor. Poirot's mustaches twitched. She comes, he whispered. The steps advanced methodically, the wooden sole gliding over polished boards. Poirot signaled Hastings, and the two leaned forward as a tall figure emerged from the corridor's gloom. A woman, slender, cloaked in a dark shawl, her face hidden beneath a hood. She paused before the secret panel, pressing lightly against it. The board shifted, revealing the slipper. She retrieved it with a careful gesture, tucking it into her cloak. Then, as though summoned by unseen compulsion, she approached the chapel door. Her hand hovered over the lock, hesitated, and then, with a soft click of metal, the door creaked open. Within, a sliver of candlelight danced across dust-laden pews and faded tapestries. She slipped inside. Now, Hastings, Poirot breathed. We follow. They crossed the threshold together, lantern held aloft. The chapel was small but richly ornamented, an alabaster altar, carved pews, and a tapestry depicting a swallow in flight. Poirot's gaze fixed upon the brooch-shaped swallow pinned to the tapestry's hem. Look there, he exclaimed softly. The missing brooch. Their visitor stood before the altar, removing her hood. Poirot's heart leapt as the candlelight revealed a woman in middle age, pale and poised. Her eyes, dark and luminous, met his. Vous? Poirot said, bowing slightly. At last, the mistress of Sudbury House and the true Eleanor. The woman's lips trembled. Monsieur Poirot, you seek the past, but I had thought it buried forever. Hastings advanced, lantern illuminating, the silver snuff-box in Poirot's hand. You retrieved these tokens. They were hidden for a reason. Eleanor's gaze flicked to the snuff-box, then to the slipper Hastings still clutched in his hand. Slowly she approached the altar. My sister Emily, she never knew her lineage. When Mother died, I could not bear to expose the scandal of our birth conceived in secrecy, hidden by our grandmother behind those walls. I remained silent, choosing exile over shame. Poirot stepped forward. Yet you could not resist return when all seemed lost. The house itself called you home. Eleanor's shoulders sagged. I watched the wallpaper's stripes, hoping Emily would discover the truth, but feared her reaction. When Mr. Aldrich uncovered the recess, I confronted him. He threatened to reveal my secret, so I persuaded him to leave. I did not mean to frighten my niece. Hastings frowned. Can the footsteps, the whisper, find me? A desperate plea, Eleanor whispered. I meant to guide Emily to remind her of our bond. But in darkness, words take on malice. For that, I am sorry. Poirot regarded her calmly. Madame, truth is the foundation of justice. Secrets suffer in shadows. Bring your confession to Mrs. Pendlebury, and you shall find forgiveness rather than reproach. Eleanor's eyes glistened. And Emily, my sister, will she forgive me? Assuredly, Poirot said. For in the end, love conquered shame. He motioned to Hastings, who offered Eleanor a reassuring nod. Together, the three retraced their steps to the corridor's end, where Mrs. Pendlebury awaited, summoned by. Faint candlelight the two sisters met, trembling, then embraced beneath the striped wallpaper that had concealed their history. Emily's tears fell upon Eleanor's shawl. I am so glad you came back, Emily murmured. Eleanor kissed her forehead. Forgive me, dear sister. I was afraid. Fear no longer, Poirot interjected gently. Sedberry House belongs to both. Of you no secret can change that. That night, the corridor lay silent once more, its stripes serene beneath the moon. But within Sedberry House, a family's hidden past had at last been revealed, and with it, the harmony that only truth can bring. Chapter 6. Dawn of reconciliation morning light poured through the mullioned windows of the morning room, casting the striped wallpaper in gentle relief. Outside, the gravel drive crunched under the carriage wheels of Mr. Frederick Lancaster, solicitor to the Pendlebury estate. His arrival, summoned at Emily's request, promised to settle lingering questions of inheritance now that Eleanor had returned. Yet as he stepped through the doorway, bowing with that precise deference of his profession, Poirot sensed another disturbance beneath Sedberry House's placid surface. Madame Pendlebury, Lancaster began, voice smooth as parchment. I trust last night's events have been satisfactorily resolved? Emily offered a tentative smile. Thanks to Monsieur Poirot, yes. My sister has come home, and no further secrets remain unless you know otherwise? Lancaster inclined his head. Indeed. I have here the original drawn by Lady Augusta Pendlebury, dated April 1898, which names Eleanor as sole heir. Codicil, however, was discovered posthumously in your late mother's desk, leaving the estate equally between both sisters, provided both are of sound mind to claim it. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. A codicil I never saw. Does it exist in writing? Precisely, Lancaster replied. I have searched your papers, but failed to locate it. Without it, the default will names Eleanor sole heir, but the courts require the later document to reflect Lady Augusta's final intentions. Hastings frowned. Surely Lady Augusta would have preserved such a document among family papers? Poirot tapped the edge of the silver snuff-box, now polished and gleaming. Madame, might this recess behind the wallpaper contain further tokens of your grandmother's hand? Emily's eyes widened. You mean another hidden panel? In their haste to seal the chapel, they may have concealed more than love. Letters, Poirot mused. Lady Augusta was known for her fastidious nature. A codicil too delicate for public eyes might lie where none would think to look. Lancaster leaned forward. If such a document exists, it must be authenticated. May I accompany Monsieur Poirot in your search? Emily nodded. Of course. Please, show us. With that, Poirot led the way to the corridor. The sisters flanked him, Lancaster trailing with a leather-bound portfolio under his arm. Every stripe on the wallpaper seemed alive under the morning sun, as if eager to divulge its next secret dot at the panel they had unhinged to reveal the slipper. Poirot paused. Here, Hastings, replace the board once more. But carefully this time. Let us search the adjacent seam more thoroughly. Hastings obliged, sliding the panel back into place. Poirot examined the vertical joins along the corridor, tapping each with the handle of his silver snuff-box. When he reached the panel nearest the morning-room door, his fingertip caught on a tiny protrusion. Here, he exclaimed. He pressed, and a faint click replied. The panel swung inward, revealing a shallow compartment lined with faded damask. Beneath a folded scrap of parchment lay a small, leather-bound notebook, stamped with the Pendlebury crest. Eleanor gasped. Mother's diary. Emily reached for it, but Poirot gently intercepted. First, the codicil if present in this notebook. Lancaster stepped forward, flicking open the diary's brass clasp. He leafed through yellowed pages until he produced a folded sheet, carefully creased. With a ceremonious air, he unfolded it to reveal a script in her grandmother's hand. I, Augusta Pendlebury, Countess of Sedbury, revise my previous testament to ensure my beloved daughters share equally in all belongings. Let no jealousy sunder our family. Lancaster's eyes gleamed. This is precisely the codicil required. Emily embraced Eleanor, tears of relief shining in her eyes. Mother's final wish restored at last. Madame, Poirot said softly, observe how affection and foresight guided every stripe on these walls. What hid your grandmother's secrets now safeguards her justice. Hastings smiled. And with justice, harmony. Lancaster closed the diary and slipped it into his portfolio. I shall file this with the court immediately. The estate shall be divided as Lady Augusta intended. As the solicitor departed with his carriage, Emily and Eleanor stood together beneath the striped corridor, their arms entwined. Poirot lit his taper lantern, studying the wallpaper one last time. Now, he turned to Hastings, the only mystery that remains is the passage of time and the healing of old wounds. Hastings chuckled. A quiet mystery, eh? One that needs no little gray cells to solve. Poirot's eyes twinkled. On the contrary, mon ami, the greatest mysteries often lie within ourselves. But at Sedbury House, at least, the walls have finally told the truth. And as dawn fully broke, the stripes along the corridor seemed to glow not with secrets, but with the promise of a new beginning, one written in ink, bound in leather, and sealed with the enduring bond of sisterhood. Chapter 7. Bonds forged in truth sunlight streamed through the mullioned windows of Sedbury House, warming the striped corridor where once sealed panels now stood ajar in testament to revealed secrets. Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury walked side by side, their footsteps echoing lightly on the polished boards. No longer did the wallpaper's jade and emerald bands bear the weight of hidden sorrow. Instead, they glowed with the promise of sisterhood restored. As they passed the panel that housed their grandmother's codicil, Eleanor paused to press her palm against it, a silent vow that never again would their bond be so clandestine. In the morning room, Captain Hastings and Hercule Poirot were seated at a small round table, enjoying tea and freshly baked scones. Emily joined them, offering both men a grateful smile. Eleanor lingered at the threshold, observing the calm scene. Hastings raised his cup. To Sedbury's future, he toasted, and to secrets kept only long enough to safeguard love. Emily and Eleanor clinked cups with them, the china ringing clear and bright. Poirot, his mustaches quivering with satisfaction, sipped his tea before setting the cup down thoughtfully. "Madame," Poirot said, addressing Eleanor, "now that all is known, I suggest we inform the household of yesterday's discoveries. A family united brings steadiness to every corner of this estate." Eleanor nodded, and together they summoned Mrs. Ives, Frances, and Miss Turner. The cook arrived first, her usual briskness tempered by curiosity. When Emily presented Lady Augusta's codicil and introduced Eleanor as both sister and co-heir, Mrs. Frances's eyes sparkled. "I am so pleased for you both, madame," she exclaimed, "and I promise my loyalty to your shared household." Miss Turner followed, shyly offering congratulations and relief that the nighttime disturbances had been laid to rest not later that day. The sisters hosted a small gathering of villagers' friends and neighbors, who had long admired Sudbury House from a distance of deference. As they assembled beneath the great oak in front of the manor, Emily and Eleanor appeared side by side, each holding a ribbon that matched the wallpaper stripes. With Poirot's gentle guidance, they cut through the ribbons, symbolically opening Sudbury House's doors to kindness and community once more. Laughter and gentle applause followed as the guests crossed the threshold, welcomed by two sisters whose unity had been tested and proven resilient. Back in the corridor, Eleanor turned to Emily and laid a hand on the painted stripes. "This place feels different now, dear sister. No secrets lurk within these walls." Emily smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her face. Truth dispelled the shadows. "I feel lighter than I have in years." Hastings appeared, leaning casually against the archway. "Your grandmother's spirit would be proud," he said. "She valued family above all." Poirot joined them, adjusting his waistcoat. "Indeed, Hastings. For in solving crimes of the heart, one discovers that the most delicate mysteries are those we create ourselves." As afternoon waned, Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart. Their carriage stood at the gate, trunks loaded and lantern lit. Eleanor and Emily bid them farewell on the gravel drive. Eleanor handed Poirot the silver snuff-box, polished anew. "A gift," she said softly, "to remember Sudbury House by." Poirot accepted it with a bow. "I shall treasure it, madame, as a reminder that love can be hidden in the stripes, but never extinguished." Hastings clasped Emily's hand before stepping back onto the carriage, tipping his hat dot when the Usta. Carriage rattled away. The two sisters stood shoulder to shoulder, watching until it vanished around the bend. Then Emily turned to Eleanor and laughed, a full, unburdened sound. "What shall we do first with our reclaimed home?" Eleanor considered. "Perhaps restore the chapel's altar, so that its prayers once again echo among these walls." They clasped hands and walked together toward the east wing, their conversation drifting through the corridor, now free of hidden panels and whispered pleas. And so Sudbury House embarked on a new chapter, one of transparency, shared inheritance, and unbreakable sisterly devotion. Beneath the stripes that had once concealed heartbreak, joy and kinship now intertwined, proving that even the most elaborate secrets yield in the face of truth, and that the strongest bonds are those forged in light, not shadow. Chapter 8. A new dawn at Sudbury. Fierce light of dawn crept through the bedroom drapes of Sudbury House, unveiling a day serenely unburdened by secrets. In the breakfast room, Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury presided over a modest feast of poached eggs and buttered toast, their faces bright with purpose. It was the morning after Poirot and Hastings had departed, and already the sisters felt the rhythmic pulse of life, returning to every corner of the manor. Eleanor poured fragrant tea from a silver pot, hers by right now, as much as Emily's, and set 2 cups before her sister. "What shall we call this room now?" she asked, tilting her head thoughtfully. "Perhaps the sunlit parlor, instead of the chamber of whispers." Emily laughed, a melody of relief. I like that. And the corridor of secrets, we can rechristen it the corridor of welcome. Let its stripes greet visitors with warmth rather than fear. She stood and placed a framed parchment, the codicil, upon the mantel, its leather binding a proud testament to their grandmother's lasting care. Their morning was punctuated by the soft tapping of a cane upon the tiled floor. Mrs. Francis appeared, carrying folders of household accounts and a list of necessary repairs. "Mesdames," she said, curtsying respectfully, "I have drawn up plans for reupholstering the chairs in the corridor and restoring the chapel altar as you wished. Also, the painter arrived early to freshen the wallpaper with your chosen colors." Eleanor's eyes gleamed. "Excellent, madame. Let the new design blend the jade and emerald into softer pastel tones, something gentle on the eye, yet honoring our family heritage." Mrs. Francis bowed. "At once, madame. I shall see to it that Sedberry House blooms anew." After breakfast, Emily and Eleanor strolled through the east wing, where the chapel door now stood unlatched. Sunbeams poured through stained glass. Windows, painting the warm pews in shards of rubies and sapphires. Eleanor approached the altar, placing the brooch-shaped swallow upon its carved edge. "Here it belongs," she whispered. "May it watch over every prayer offered beneath these beams." Emily knelt beside her sister. "You have given me more than a co-heir, Eleanor. You have given me companionship." She took Eleanor's hand, and together they rose, the echo of their footsteps soft but purposeful on the ancient flagstones. That afternoon, villagers arrived with baskets of homegrown flowers, offering hearty laughter and cheerful chatter. Emily and Eleanor stood side by side in the hallway, soon to be repainted, welcoming each guest. The atmosphere was light, unshadowed by past anxieties. Mrs. Francis directed the flower arrangements, while Miss Turner guided the children in placing petals along the corridor. Word of the transformation spread quickly through Little Farnborough. By evening, the manor's front lawn hosted a bonfire and lantern-lit tables, where neighbors toasted the Pendlebury's renewed hospitality. A fiddler played a jaunty tune, and even the stern-faced solicitor, Mr. Lancaster, relaxed into a genuine smile as he recounted a humorous anecdote from court proceedings. In the midst of the celebration, Emily raised a crystal glass. "To new beginnings," she called, voice clear in the night air. "To truth, which has freed our hearts and reunited our family." Eleanor stood beside her, and together they clinked glasses with their guests. The lantern light glinted off the silver snuff-box pinned to Emily's sash, a subtle remembrance of Poirot's deft handiwork. Later, as the bonfire's embers smoldered and guests drifted home, Eleanor and Emily wandered back through the corridor of gentle pastels. Gazing at the stripes, now soft pistachio and mint, they shared a quiet moment of sisterly reflection. "Eleanor," Emily said softly, "do you ever regret returning?" Eleanor paused before the panel where the slipper once lay. "Never," she replied. "Here I found forgiveness and purpose." She offered her hand, and Emily took it without hesitation. Beyond the striped walls, stars glittered overhead, marking the end of one chapter and the promise of another. Sedberry House, once a fortress of hidden truths, now stood open to light, laughter, and love. And though the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot had departed for London, their work endured in the harmony of two sisters, the kindness of a loyal household, and the gentle glow of a house restored at last. Chapter 9. The promise of tomorrow. A crisp autumn breeze rustled the amber leaves outside. Sedberry House as Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury emerged onto the terrace at first light. The air carried the faint scent of wood smoke from distant hearths, mingling with the dew-damp fragrance of late roses still clinging to the garden's neat borders. In the house behind them, corridors once shadowed by secrets now stood bright. and welcoming a testament to the sisters' courage and Poirot's genius. Yet as they gazed toward the horizon, both felt the stirring of new responsibilities and fresh possibilities. "Eleanor," Emily said quietly, tracing the stone balustrade, "we have restored the house, but our duties as co-heirs have only begun. The villagers look to us now for charity, for guidance, for purpose." Her sister nodded, smoothing the folds of her sage-green riding habit. "True, dear Emily. The codicil ensures our inheritance, but inheritance is a seed. We must nurture it with action." She paused, then smiled. "Let us begin with the harvest festival. The barley field will be ready in 2 weeks, and I propose we host a communal celebration on the threshing floor." Emily's eyes brightened. "A splendid idea. The festival could raise funds for the parish school and mend the rifts in neighboring families." She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Perhaps we could invite the villagers to decorate the house with garlands, too, celebrating our renewed bond." Eleanor linked arms with her sister. "Yes, and I will speak to Mr. Lancaster about setting up a trust for the church repairs. And the school bursaries." Her tone grew serious. "We must honor Lady Augusta's legacy in every choice we make." They paced the terrace in companionable silence, the manor's silhouette framed by pink dawn clouds. Below, Mrs. Francis appeared in the garden gate, carrying a basket of freshly picked apples. At her side walked Miss Turner, balancing a sheaf of letters. "Ladies," Mrs. Francis called, "the baker from Little Farnborough has arrived early, with bread for today's lunch, and the children have made drawings for the festival invitations. Miss Turner has them here." She proffered the letters like so many tiny artworks each, adorned with watercolor wreaths and looping scripts, reading, "Join us at Sedberry House." Eleanor accepted a drawing, bending to admire a depiction of 2 sisters beneath a great oak. "This is wonderful. Their art captures our story as clearly as any words." She turned to Mrs. Francis. "Set the baker's loaves aside. We shall inspect the kitchen in a moment." Emily gathered the letters. "And you, Miss Turner, shall deliver these invitations with a personal word to each family. Use them as occasions to strengthen ties and foster goodwill." The maid curtsied, eyes alight with purpose. With tasks delegated, the sisters retreated inside to the morning room. Eleanor spread a map of the estate across the table, marking roads, fields, and clusters of cottages. Emily brought 2 cups of tea, setting them beside a polished silver tray. "Let us plan the itinerary," Emily suggested, sipping her tea. "On the festival day, we'll open the chapel for a morning service. Then, at midday, the barley threshing and feast. In the afternoon, children's races and music. As evening falls, a barn dance beneath the string lanterns." Eleanor tapped the map. "The threshing floor is half a mile down the lane. We should arrange carriages for those who cannot walk, and ensure the path is well lit." She frowned thoughtfully. "And perhaps a small infirmary tent, in case of sprains or falls." Emily smiled. Prudence and kindness, an excellent combination. She reached across the map to press her hand over Eleanor's. "Sister, I feel invigorated. Never before have I been so sure of our purpose." "Eleanor," Emily said softly, "tell me, do you still think of leaving Sedberry House for London or the Continent?" She recalled how Eleanor had once feared her past too scandalous to face again. Eleanor shook her head firmly. "No, Emily. My exile is at an end. Here, where love and truth have converged, is where I belong. My future lies in service to this place and its people." She lifted her teacup in a small salute. "To Sedberry, and to our promise of tomorrow." Emily returned the salute. To tomorrow, indeed. They clinked cups, the china's ring echoing with the certainty of their renewed lives. Later that morning, they rode through the estate's winding lanes, Eleanor leading the way on a chestnut moray, Emily following on a dapple gray. Villagers. paused in their chores, carrying hay, tending goats, or mending fences, to wave and offer greetings. Each "Good morning, Mistress Pendlebury," felt like a blessing, a reminder that trust once broken could be restored with gentle deeds. When they returned to the manor, the sun had climbed higher, and Sedbury House glowed in the golden light. Under the carved oak over the terrace, the sisters dismounted and stood side by side. Silently, they watched a swallow dart through the air, a living echo of the brooch that adorned the chapel altar. In years hence, Eleanor mused, may this house still stand as a beacon of unity and hope, and may our stories show that even the deepest secrets yield to kindness and resolve. Emily added. Together, they stepped toward the great front doors opened wide, not by force, but by hearts resolved to honor the past and embrace the future. As the wide halls welcomed them home, the promise of tomorrow shone brightly in every stripe, every beam, and every soul in Sedbury House. Chapter 10. Full circle a gentle rain began to fall as Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury stepped onto the terrace of Sedbury House, the soft patter of droplets echoing against the roof and blending with the chirp of awakening birds. The sisters had spent the morning reviewing the final arrangements for the harvest festival, cataloging prizes for the children's races, confirming the baker's special barley loaves, and overseeing the arrangement of lanterns along the garden paths. Now, in a rare quiet moment, they paused together at the wrought iron balustrade, gazing out over the misty lanes and rolling fields. Do you remember? Emily said, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. When we first arrived here under the shadow of those stripes? How the wallpaper seemed to hold watch over us, mocking our ignorance. Eleanor nodded, her eyes reflecting the gray sky. I remember every tremor of fear, every whisper of the unknown. And yet, what seemed a prison became a pathway leading, used to each other, to truths we had long buried. She inhaled the cool air. It is strange, is it not, how walls meant to conceal can, in time, compel revelation. Emily smiled. Yes, and now, those walls stand ready to welcome every secret we choose to share in every memory we choose to cherish. She gestured toward the corridor beyond the open French doors. Shall we take one last walk through the corridor of welcome before festivities begin? The sisters crossed the threshold, their footsteps falling in unison upon the polished floorboards. The wallpaper, recently refurbished in soft pastel hues, still bore the subtle banded pattern of jade and emerald, a respectful nod to Lady Augusta's design. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, illuminating each panel so that the stripes no longer felt oppressive but uplifting, like ribbons of promise guiding one's way. Emily paused before the secret panels they had pried open to reveal. The snuff box, the photograph, the slipper, and ultimately the codicil. She reached out to touch the seam. I placed a small plaque here yesterday, she said softly, a reminder of our journey. In stripes, we found our past. In truth, we shape our future. Eleanor read the inscription, her fingers tracing. The gold lettering. Perfectly said, dear sister. She turned to Emily, her expression resolute. Today, we honor both the past and the future. We know where we come from, and we know where we are going. And that knowledge is our greatest inheritance. They continued along the corridor until they reached the chapel door. Eleanor pulled the iron latch, and they entered the restored sanctuary. The altar, refurbished with ivory linens and polished oak, now bore the silver swallow brooch as its centerpiece. Candles flickered in carved wall sconces, and a fragrant bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the garden at Eleanor's. Instruction rested beside the altar rail. Emily crossed to the pulpit and ran her hand along the polished wood. How fitting that our grandmother's place of worship should bear witness to this day. May every prayer offered here ring with gratitude for truth revealed and love restored. Eleanor joined her, placing a gentle hand on her sister's arm. "And may this house remain a beacon for those seeking not only shelter, but also honesty, compassion, and unity." A distant bell pealed, calling the villagers to gather on the lawn below. The sisters exited the chapel, pausing for a moment to adjust their shawls before stepping back into the corridor. As they walked, Eleanor hummed a soft tune, an old lullaby their mother used to sing. Emily joined in, their voices weaving together in harmony, the notes drifting through the corridors like ghosts turned into blessings. At the end of the hall, they emerged onto the terrace just as the rain ceased and a pale rainbow arced across the eastern sky. Below, lanterns sparkled along the gravel drive, and the first guests, bundled in shawls and clapping hands, marched in a bright procession. Toward the house, children waved flags off green and gold, their laughter carrying upward like birdsong. Emily and Eleanor stood side by side, watching their community unite in celebration. Nearby, Mrs. Francis directed the placement of chairs, while Miss Turner distributed cider and biscuits. The baker proffered fresh loaves, and even Mr. Lancaster, in formal attire, smiled as he offered to help steward the bread table. Eleanor leaned toward Emily. "Our grandmother would be proud, n'est-ce pas?" Emily squeezed her sister's hand. "She would, Eleanor. And so am I." She inhaled the crisp autumn air, the scent of ripening grain and damp earth. This harvest festival is not just a festivity. It is the culmination of our shared journey. It marks the day when secrets gave way to solidarity, when walls became bridges. As the villagers sang a traditional harvest hymn, the sisters stepped forward to address the gathering. Hand in hand, they spoke of Lady Augusta's legacy, of the importance of honesty and kindness, and of their gratitude to all who had supported them. When their speech ended, the crowd erupted in cheers, and music began, fiddles and flutes playing a lively refrain. Emily and Eleanor joined the first dance, their steps sure and graceful, hearts buoyant. Around them, the villagers joined in, weaving a tapestry of fellowship beneath the waning light. Sedberry House, once a repository of concealed truths, now thrummed with open joy and unguarded affection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in warm amber, both sisters knew that their story had come full circle. The maze of striped walls had yielded its riddles, and in its place stood a home where every corridor led not to secrets, but to shared hope. And so, beneath that autumn sky, they danced into the promise of tomorrow together, at last and whole. Chapter 11. Echoes of the Swallowy fortnight had passed since the harvest festival, and Sedberry House wore its calm grace like a well-tailored garment. Ivy trailed across the stone walls, and the pastel-hued corridor gleamed under soft afternoon light. Yet for Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury, there remained one final obligation before life could settle into its renewed rhythm. A letter of thanks to Monsieur Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings. In the morning room, Eleanor dipped her quill into amber ink. The silver snuff box gifted to Poirot sat, open on the desk, its lid reflecting her thoughtful reflection. Emily stood by the bay window, watching the gardener gently prune the rosebush. "Eleanor, do you think he will reply?" Emily asked, voice hushed as though sharing a secret with the roses. Eleanor paused, lifting her gaze. "He always replies, dear sister. Even when one suspects he has returned to London's bustle, his gratitude is as meticulous as his mustaches." She smiled and resumed writing. "Distinguished Monsieur Poirot, with heartfelt gratitude we recall your deft guidance through the striped corridor and the chapel's hidden secrets. Our home and hearts stand restored, thanks to your little Bray, Sells and Captain Hastings's steadfast support. We remain forever in your debt. Yours sincerely, Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury, signatures complete." She folded the parchment and sealed it with wax, stamped in Lady Augusta's crest. Emily affixed. Another letter for Captain Hastings, recalling his good humor and unwavering loyalty. When both letters lay ready, Mrs. Francis entered bearing the morning tea tray. "Madames," she said, curtsing, "the courier from Little Farnborough awaits. He will carry these letters safely to London by tonight's coach." "Thank you, Mrs. Francis," Eleanor replied. "Please see him in." Moments later, a sturdy lad in a linen waistcoat appeared at the door. He took the letters with respectful bows and promised prompt delivery as the courier departed down the lane. Emily and Eleanor shared a contented glance. "That concludes our business," Emily said, releasing a breath she had not realized she held. "At last we may return to ordinary days." Yet ordinary in Sedberry House make new undertakings. Eleanor had begun planning Sunday services in the restored chapel. Emily oversaw the village school's bursary program. Their bond, forged in adversity, now guided each compassionate act. The memories of striped wallpaper no longer haunted them, but served as gentle reminders of unity. Late that afternoon, a black hansom cab rattled up the drive, and a familiar figure descended. Captain Hastings, fresh from London in his well-worn great coat. His cheer was undimmed by travel. "Mademoiselle," he called, tipping his hat, "I trust you are well?" Emily and Eleanor hurried to greet him. Hastings produced a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "For you, Eleanor, and for you, Emily." Inside were 2 hand-carved ivory pens, engraved with their initials and a swallow motif. "From Monsieur Poirot," Hastings explained, handing the pens over. "He said that every story needs a pen worthy of its authors." Tears glimmered in Eleanor's eyes as she traced the engraving. How thoughtful! Emily examined her own pen, smiling at the tiny swallow dancing on the clip. Hastings poured tea and joined them at the round table. "And Poirot sends warmest regards," he added. "He said you might treasure these pens as tokens of the brotherhood we share." They spoke of London's bustle, of Poirot's latest cases, and Hastings's hopes for rest, while sipping tea from fine china. Outside, the light waned, and lanterns flickered in the garden. The peaceful scene spoke of healing and new beginnings. When evening drew close, Hastings rose. "I must return to London tomorrow," he announced. "But rest assured, if you ever require my assistance again, you have only to send word." He embraced each sister in turn. Eleanor clasped his hand. "Thank you, Captain. Your friendship has been a gift." Emily added, "Safe travels, dear friend. May your own home always welcome you so warmly." As the cab carried Hastings away, Emily and Eleanor watched until its lantern-lit silhouette vanished around the bend. Then Eleanor turned and placed the ivory pen beside the snuff-box on the desk. "We have our own mystery now," she said softly. "The gentle puzzles of daily life, the quiet decisions that shape character and community." Emily took her sister's hand. "And together we will solve them all." She led Eleanor to the corridor, where the pastel stripes caught the fading light. "Let us write the next chapter, sister one of kindness, purpose, and unbreakable trust." Under the swallow-emblazoned pens and the watchful echo of Lady Augusta's legacy, the Pendlebury sisters walked side by side into a future bright with promise. And though Poirot's silhouette receded into memory, his influence lingered in every thoughtful act and every gentle choice made within Sedberry House, proof that the smallest details, once revealed, can guide a life forevermore. Chapter 12. The Light of Legacy Sunlight glimmered across the dew-kissed lawns of Sedberry House, heralding a day unlike any the sisters had yet known. Eleanor Pendlebury stood at the top of the grand staircase, brooch-shaped swallow pinned to her lapel, while Emily adjusted a garland of ivy around the banister rail. Below them, the pastel-hued corridor stretched out in serene invitation, its stripes now emblematic of hope rather than concealment. Today, they would host the first annual Day of Legacy, inviting villagers, friends, and distant kin to celebrate the memory of Lady Augusta and the bright future she had envisioned. By mid-morning, the courtyard bustled with activity. Long oak tables were arrayed beneath a canopy of climbing roses, each place setting marked with a small card bearing the Pendlebury crest. In one corner, Mrs. Francis and Miss Turner arranged delicate bouquets of autumn blooms. In another, the baker from Little Farnborough piled loaves of harvest bread on linen-draped stands. Eleanor moved among them with quiet grace, offering thanks and encouragement, while Emily oversaw the placement of framed quotations from Lady Augusta's diary along the garden walls. Charity begins at home, but it must reach beyond these gates. Emily read aloud from one, then stepped back to admire how the words caught the sunlight. Mother's counsel rings true today. Eleanor nodded, smoothing the folds of her riding habit. And soon, the lantern-lit procession to the chapel will remind us that spiritual inheritance is as vital as material. She glanced at the small, restored chapel door at the far end of the corridor. Shall we finalize the order of readings? They returned inside to the morning room, where a slender theodolite set up by Mr. Lancaster to record the day's ceremonies cast gentle shadows on the polished floor. Emily unrolled parchment scrolls listing speakers, the village schoolmaster, a local clergyman, and for the grand finale, Eleanor and Emily themselves. Hastings, invited as guest of honor, stood by the window, adjusting his cravat and surveying the preparations with a proud smile. When the clock struck 11, a quiet hush descended. Villagers, dressed in their Sunday best, gathered on the terrace, while children clustered eagerly at the edge of the flower beds. The sisters emerged, linked arm in arm, and led the procession through the corridor of welcome. Sunlight danced across the pastel stripes as they passed, reflecting slender bands of color on crisp white stockings and polished boots. At the corridor's end, the chapel doors stood open, candles flickering within. Inside the chapel, the scent of wildflowers mingled with beeswax. Lady Augusta's codicil and the silver snuff-box lay displayed on the altar rail, symbols of the house's journey from secrecy to unity. The clergyman intoned a prayer of thanksgiving, his voice echoing off carved stone. Next, the schoolmaster spoke of the bursary fund, promising that young minds would flourish through education. Laughter rippled when a village child, summoned as a token speaker, recited a short poem in praise of two sisters kind and wise. As applause settled, Eleanor and Emily stepped forward. Eleanor's voice, steady yet warm, paid tribute to Lady Augusta's vision. How love could endure beyond death, how truth could free the bonds of fear. Emily followed, her tone heartfelt, expressing gratitude to the villagers whose support had sustained them. She spoke of the corridor of welcome, inviting every soul to walk its length in friendship and trust. When their address concluded, Hastings presented the sisters with a bound volume, a compilation of Mrs. Francis's recipes, Miss Turner's school essays, and villagers' recollections of Sudbury House through the decades. A living record, he declared, of past, present, and future. Eleanor accepted it with tears in her eyes. To cherish and add to, she said. Emily pressed her sister's hand, so that our legacy may be an ongoing story. Outside, the feast commenced beneath the oak canopy. Plates of roasted fowl, honey-glazed vegetables, and hearty pies circulated among laughter and clinking glasses. Children danced to the fiddler's tune, while elders reminisced under the dappled sunlight. At one table, Mr. Lancaster quietly made notes for the estate records, ensuring that every donation and gift would be properly stewarded. As afternoon waned, the sisters slipped away to the striped corridor, now deserted for the moment. Eleanor rested her head against Emily's shoulder, gazing down the soft bands of pastel. "We did well, sister," she whispered. Emily kissed her brow. "Together, we honor the past and shape what is to come." Their moment of stillness was broken by the chime of the chapel bell. With hands entwined, they followed its call, stepping forward into the chapel's warm glow. There, amidst candles and memories, they vowed to carry forward Lady Augusta's light, ensuring that every corridor, every room, every heart in Sedbury House would shine with truth, compassion, and hope for generations yet to come. Chapter 13. Threads of continuity. The dawn chorus of songbirds greeted Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury as they descended the grand staircase on the morning after the Day of Legacy. In the great hall, sunlight poured through the leaded windows, illuminating the tapestries that told Sedbury House's story, from Lady Augusta's founding to the trials of secrets and the triumph of reconciliation. Today, the sisters had planned a new undertaking, one that would bind the house and village together through education and shared purpose. In the morning room, Miss Turner laid out maps of nearby hamlets and sketches of the schoolhouse they intended to build on the edge of the estate. "Mesdames," she began, "if we situate the school near the stream, children from Oakwood and Willow Glen can attend safely, and we can harness water for heating in winter." Emily studied the plans, her eyes alight with enthusiasm. "Excellent," Emily said, tracing the route on the map with a slender finger. "We'll need funds for bricks, wood, and master salaries. Mrs. Francis, would you oversee a series of fundraising teas in the Manor Gardens?" The cook bowed. "At once, Madame. I shall recruit the best bakers and organize music to draw every neighbor." Eleanor leaned forward. "I will speak to Mr. Lancaster about establishing a small endowment from the estate's revenues. With the codicil in place, we can allocate a portion each year." She smiled at her sister. "Together, we can make education the living legacy of Lady Augusta's wisdom." Later that morning, they rode out across the misty fields to meet the parish schoolmaster, Mr. Clive, and his wife. The couple greeted them at a rustic cottage surrounded by flower beds. Mr. Clive, a scholarly man with spectacles perched on his nose, held a sheaf of papers detailing the curriculum: reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, and practical skills like gardening and sewing. "Mesdames," he said, "these lessons will give village children both knowledge and confidence. With your support, I aim to open the school by Michaelmas." Eleanor pressed his hand. "We shall ensure the school opens before autumn's end, and that every child wears warm cloaks we will provide." Emily added, "And we will host weekly story lessons in this very corridor, lessons beneath the stripes. I propose where children gather to hear tales of courage and kindness." Mr. Clive laughed. "A fitting tribute, madame. And I'm certain the pastel stripes will inspire young imaginations, not alarm them." As midday approached, the sisters returned to the manor for a light luncheon. They paused in the corridor of welcome, noting how the soft hues and gentle light had already begun to calm new visitors. Eleanor touched a panel where a small brass plaque now recalled their journey. "These stripes," she said softly, "are like threads weaving past into present." Emily nodded. "And through our school, they will weave into the future generations of readers, thinkers, and helpers." She glanced at her sister's determined expression. "I couldn't have asked for a more steadfast partner." That afternoon, Mrs. Francis and Miss Turner hosted the first of many garden teas beneath the rose-covered pergola. Villagers gathered on wooden benches, sipping lavender-infused tea and sharing baked apple cakes. Each guest contributed a few pence toward the school fund, and laughter mingled with the warm breeze. Even stoic farmers cracked smiles as Emily and Eleanor circulated among them, accepting donations and offering heartfelt thanks. By evening, they returned indoors to review the day's receipts. The sum exceeded their expectations, a testament to the community's generosity. Eleanor counted the coins with care, while Emily recorded each name in a leather-bound ledger. "Look at this," Emily exclaimed, pointing to a line where Mrs. Alden, the shoemaker's wife, had donated an embroidered handkerchief. Her handiwork could be auctioned to benefit the bursary fund. Eleanor considered the suggestion thoughtfully. Splendid idea. We'll hold a harvest auction next week, featuring villagers' crafts and produce. In this way, everyone gives what they can. Emily beamed. A collective effort, indeed, just as our family's unity produced so much good. As candlelight flickered in the morning room, the sisters stepped into the corridor of welcome, one last time before retiring. They paused beneath the painted bands, listening to the soft creak of settling timbers and the distant whisper of the stream. Eleanor smiled. Sedberry's walls no longer hide anything but open wide to all who seek knowledge and kindness. Emily reached for her sister's hand. Our grandmother would be proud to see her house transformed into a place of learning and community. And I am honored to walk this path with you. They hugged beneath the stripes, two lives intertwined by history and hope. In the hush of that corridor, the future took shape thread by thread, teacher by teacher, neighbor by neighbor. Sedberry House, once a labyrinth of secrets, had become a tapestry of possibility, each stripe a pledge that truth and compassion would guide every step to come. Chapter 14. Seeds of tomorrow. A golden haze settled over Sedberry House as the harvest auction day dawned. Beneath the rose-clad pergola, villagers gathered amid stalls adorned with woven baskets brimming with apples, jars of honey, hand-knit shawls, and embroidered linens. The corridor of welcome, painted in soft pistachio and mint stripes, stood open behind them, its gentle hues a silent invitation to all. Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury stepped onto the gravel courtyard, clipboard and gavel in hand, exchanging determined glances. "Madame Frances," Emily called, raising her voice above the convivial chatter, "will the auction catalogues be ready?" The cook, apron dusted with flour and her cheeks flushed with excitement, presented a neat stack of booklets, each page numbered and illustrated with simple sketches of the items to be sold. "Here you are, madame," Mrs. Francis said, curtsying. "And Miss Turner has compiled the bidders' list." Eleanor took a catalogue and flipped it open. "Everything is accounted for," she announced. From Mr. Alden's embroidered handkerchief to the schoolmaster's watercolor maps. Let us begin. By mid-morning, the first Lotta-laden oak table, decorated with autumn leaves, was called. Emily tapped her gavel. Lot 1, a table fit for 6, crafted by Mr. Green the carpenter, who has donated a portion of its proceeds to the bursary fund. Do I hear 5 shillings? 5 shillings. Thank you, Mrs. Alden sold. Applause and laughter rippled through the crowd as the table was claimed. Hastings, visiting for the day at Poirot's behest, stood near the gallery ladder, scribbling bids with good-natured seriousness. When a travel trunk, hand-painted with pastoral scenes, came up, he raised his paddle high, prompting rival bids from the vicar and the schoolmaster alike, before securing it for 8 shillings on behalf of the estate. Eleanor surveyed the scene with pride. "Our community's spirit is remarkable," she told Emily. "Already we have raised more than enough for bricks and mortar." Emily nodded, her eyes shining. "And we still have the preserves and the shawls to go." As the auction continued, children clustered at a stall of freshly baked rolls and cups of spiced cider, their cheeks flushed with sugar. Elsewhere, Mrs. Francis offered tastes of her famous apple cake, while Miss Turner recorded every donation with meticulous care. The sun climbed higher, casting the gently swaying vines of the pergola into sharp relief. By noon, the sisters called for a brief intermission. They cupped hands around steaming mugs of tea and greeted guests. Mrs. Alden approached, offering a gift of hand-knit mittens for the first 10 schoolchildren. "For winter," she said with a shy smile. Eleanor accepted them gratefully. "You are most generous. They shall warm many small hands." After a light luncheon of cold meats and garden greens, the auction resumed. A collection of honey and beeswax candles fetched encouraging. Bids. Then the piano stool upholstered in sea-foam velvet elicited a friendly duel between two young ladies before settling at 6 shillings. Each sale, each coin dropped into the wooden collection box, felt like a small victory against isolation. And past sorrow's dot, as the final lot, a collection of Miss Turner's school essays, bound in a leather volume, was brought forth. Emily tapped her gavel one last time. Lot 27, a glimpse into young minds' hopes. Do I hear 3 shillings? 3 and 6, 4, 5? 5 shillings to Mr. Lancaster sold. A warm cheer rose, and Eleanor stepped forward to thank every bidder. Your generosity ensures that when Michaelmas arrives, our schoolhouse will open its doors with bricks laid and resources in hand, she proclaimed. Today, you have each sown seeds of knowledge that will blossom for years to come. Amid heartfelt applause, the sisters shared a moment of silent gratitude. Hastings approached, bowing with a slight flourish. Monsieur Poirot sends his congratulations, he said, handing them a telegram bearing a flourish of violet ink. Bravo, mademoiselle. Your enterprise rivals the greatest of detective feats, uniting a community for a cause most noble. H.P. Emily laughed, eyes bright. Even Poirot recognizes a good mystery when he sees one, particularly the mystery of human kindness. Eleanor tucked the telegram into her pocket. May every future chapter of Sedberry's story continue in this spirit. As the courtyard emptied and the final coins were counted ample for both school construction and the bursary fund, Emily and Eleanor strolled through the corridor of welcome. The pastel stripes, now warm in the afternoon light, greeted them like old friends. Eleanor, Emily said softly, pausing before the panel that once concealed the snuff-box and codicil, do you ever imagine life without these stripes, without Sedberry House's peculiar past? Eleanor shook her head, her smile serene. No, dear sister, for it is in those stripes that we found our purpose in each other. They led us from secrecy to solidarity. And now, as we lay these bricks and open these doors, our legacy grows. Together, they reached the chapel door, where a bouquet of autumn flowers had been placed in thanksgiving. They crossed the threshold into the quiet sanctuary, its candles unlit, but its promise aglow with memory and hope outside. The sun dipped low behind the oaks, painting Sedberry's walls in hues of amber and rose. And as sisters Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury watched the final light fade, they knew that the seeds sown that day would burgeon into a flourishing harvest of community, compassion, and education, proof that even the smallest mysteries of the heart could yield the richest rewards. Chapter 15. The Harvest of Hearts. The first chill of November hovered in the air as Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury stood at the edge of the newly laid schoolyard, the threshold of their shared labor and aspiration. A crisp wind stirred fallen leaves into golden spirals around their boots. Behind them, the low hum of activity rose from children gathering firewood for winter, tutors laying out desks in the bright new classrooms, and Mrs. Francis arranging steaming kettles of cider in the small common room. At this moment of culmination, the two sisters felt the swell of pride and anticipation mingle in their hearts. Eleanor brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. Tomorrow they will fill these benches with eager faces, she murmured, nodding toward the long rows of polished oak desks. Can you imagine, Emily, how many dreams will take root here? Emily smiled. It is more than a vision now. It is reality. Lady Augusta's legacy lives in every plank and pane. She reached into her muff and drew forth a small leather pouch. With a ceremonial flourish, she sprinkled a handful of barley seeds along the base of the school's flagpole. For a harvest of knowledge, she proclaimed, her voice carrying across the yard. May these seeds grow as our children's. Mine's will. A chorus of cheers arose, and Mr. Clive, the schoolmaster, stepped forward in his tweed coat, spectacles glinting. "Mesdames, on behalf of our pupils and their families, we thank you." He gestured toward a nearby board bearing the school's motto, "In truth we learn, in kindness we grow." The bright letters seemed to dance in the dying sunlight as dusk approached. The sisters walked the perimeter of the school grounds, the lamp-posts lit one by one in careful preparation for the morning. Eleanor paused by a row of saplings, oaks, and maples she had personally planted at the rear of the yard. "Each tree a guardian," she said softly, touching the bark. "They will shelter our children and stand witness to every first lesson, every triumph, and every tear." Emily slipped her arm through her sister's. "And in years to come, these saplings will be mighty woods, just as our small act of care has grown into a thriving community." She sighed happily, glancing back toward Sedberry House, its pastel corridor visible through the lattice of bare branches. "It is time we return to our home, sister, and prepare for the rest of winter's tasks." They retraced their steps along the winding path through the village, pausing to speak with neighbors. Mrs. Alden offered knitted socks for cold feet. Old Mr. Meller donated cured hams for the school kitchen, and young Lucy Fern brought a basket of apples she had baked into a crisp. Each gift, simple in itself, represented the villagers' affection and shared investment in the sisters' undertaking. When they reached the manor, lanterns glowed along the garden wall. Mrs. Francis greeted them with steaming bowls of soup in the morning room. The rich aroma of root vegetables and herbs mingled with the warmth of the hearth. Eleanor peered into her bowl, then across at Emily. "To nourishment of body as well as mind," she toasted, raising her spoon. Emily nodded, smiling through the flicker of lamplight. "And to the endless journey of learning." Over the meal, Miss Turner produced a ledger of enrollment forms. One by one, Emily and Eleanor signed their names as guarantors of each pupil's education and well-being. As they did so, a gentle hush fell, an unspoken recognition of the trust placed in them and the sacred responsibility they carried. Later, upstairs in the pastel-striped corridor, the sisters paused before the brass plaque that bore their grandmother's inscription, "In stripes we found our past. In truth, we shape our future." The soft glow of the wall sconces revealed the plaque's golden letters, vivid and unwavering. Eleanor placed a hand on the plaque. "Never will I take this for granted," she whispered. "These walls witnessed our confession, our reconciliation, and our promise." Emily joined her. "And now they bear silent witness to the beginning of generations of learning and compassion." As night deepened, they climbed to the turret chamber, where a small telescope pointed toward the stars. Eleanor wiped its lens before peering through. "The constellations are bright tonight," she observed, "just as our hopes shine in these young minds." Emily joined her at the window. "Look," she said, pointing to two stars flanking the North Star like guiding lights. "They remind me of us, side by side." They stood in companionable silence, watching the night sky until the wind whispered a lullaby through the eaves. Then Eleanor set the telescope aside and turned to her sister. "Come, Emily. The morrow awaits, and so do they. Our children, our neighbors, our hopes." Emily slipped her arm through Eleanor's. "Together as always." And thus, beneath the sentinel stripes of Sedberry House, two sisters closed one chapter and prepared to guide a new one, where the harvest of hearts and minds would feed both home and world, nourishing all who ventured beyond the corridors into the wide horizon of possibility. Chapter 16. A winter's vigil snow fell softly on the lawns of Sedberry House, blanketing the pastel corridors in hushed white. Inside, hearth fires crackled cheerfully, casting dancing shadows across the tapestries and the brass plaque that bore Lady Augusta's maxim. Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury stood side by side before the great window in the morning room, watching villagers make their way up the drive bundled in wool scarves, carrying lanterns and baskets of figs and spiced cakes. Tonight was the winter vigil in the restored chapel, a new tradition they had inaugurated to strengthen community ties in the long nights before. Christmas. Eleanor draped a fur-lined cloak over Emily's shoulders and checked the silver swallow brooch pinned to her own lapel. "The north wind bites sharper than I anticipated," she murmured. Emily smiled, pressing her sister's hand. "True, but a vigil warms both body and spirit. I have invited Mr. Clive's pupils to sing carols, and Mrs. Francis has prepared roasted chestnuts and hot cider." She glanced toward the door as Miss Turner entered with a tray of polished candlesticks. "Shall we light them now, or wait until twilight deepens?" "Let us light them now," Eleanor decided, taking a tapers and setting it in a brass holder. One by one, they illuminated all 18 along the corridor, each flame reflecting in the frosted panes. The sisters paused beneath the soft mint and pistachio stripes, their faces alight with anticipation. "This corridor has witnessed our grandmother's secrets, our reconciliations, our harvests of hope," Emily whispered. "Tonight, let it witness our pledge to keep kindness burning through winter's coldest days." As dusk settled, the congregation gathered before the chapel door. The sisters greeted each family personally, little Anna Reed clutching her mother's hand, the Miller twins sliding hand-knit mittens through their pockets, and Mr. Lancaster carrying a case of hymn books. When all were assembled, Eleanor pushed open the iron-bound door, and the visitors filed inside, filling the pews with soft murmurs of excitement. The chapel, restored to its former elegance, glowed by candlelight. The ivory altar cloth bore the silver snuff-box and the leather-bound diary as memorials of the house's journey. Above, the stained glass swallow caught the lamplight in jewel. Tones. Emily led the first carol, her clear voice echoing under the vaulted ceiling. In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan. Soon, children joined in, their voices sweet and pure, filling the rafters with warmth. After the carols, Eleanor rose to speak. "Dear friends," she began, her tone resonant in the stillness. "When snow silences the fields and the night grows long, we gather to remember the light that never fades. May this vigil remind us that though darkness falls, our community's faith and friendship shine ever bright." A hush followed, broken only by the flicker of candles and the gentle sigh of the wind outside. Mrs. Francis emerged carrying trays, heaped with chestnuts and steaming mugs of apple-spiced cider. The congregation moved to the adjoining warmth of the morning room, laughter mingling with the scent of roasting nuts. Children huddled in clusters, hands cupping mugs, while elders exchanged stories of Christmases past. Mr. Lancaster offered Emily a slice of fig cake. "Prepared by Mrs. Francis herself," he said with a wink. Emily laughed, savoring the spice-laced sweetness. A perfect complement to this gathering. Meanwhile, Eleanor spoke quietly with Mr. Clive and Miss Turner about spring plans for the school's garden, perhaps a swath of winter roses against the eastern wall. Their voices, low and hopeful, drifted through the corridor of candles and colored stripes, promising renewal even before the thaw. At length, the gathering thinned. As houses around Little Farnborough grew silent under their freshly fallen quilts of snow, Emily and Eleanor escorted the last families to the door, ensuring each child received a hand-knit scarf or a candle to light their way home. When the chapel was empty and the morning room's fires burned low, the sisters returned to the corridor, extinguishing each taper one by one. Standing beneath the now dark stripes, Eleanor slipped an arm around Emily's waist. "Tonight exceeded all I hoped for," she said softly. "Faith, hope, and charity, our grandmother's principles brought to life." Emily leaned into her sister. "And so the legacy continues through every season and every vigil." They crossed the threshold into the frozen night, stepping onto the frosted stone as the final snowflakes drifted down. Lantern in hand, They walked slowly toward the manor's front door, the swallowed hush of the snow absorbing their footsteps. Within, Sedberry House waited its stripes inscrutable by day, but by night revealed in candlelight as a pathway not to hidden secrets, but to unity, warmth, and the enduring glow of sisterly devotion. Chapter 17. Whispers of spring late February sunlight fell softly upon Sedberry House, catching in icicles that dripped gently from the eaves. Beneath the pastel-striped corridor, Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury moved with purpose. After the hush of winter, a subtle thaw had begun both in the world outside and in hearts warmed by the winter vigil. Today, they planned to reopen the chapel for early morning prayers and inspect the saplings planted beside the schoolyard. Measuring how far the young oaks and maples had grown since autumn. In the morning room, Eleanor poured steaming tea as Emily spread a bundle of letters across the table. "Invitations for the spring equinox luncheon," Emily said, capping the topmost envelope. "I've asked Mr. Clive's pupils to press wild violets for each guest symbols of growth and renewal." Eleanor nodded. "And I have arranged for the painter to touch up the corridor panels where the frost left tiny cracks. This house must reflect our inner thaw as the season turns." Finished, they donned cloaks lined with rabbit fur and stepped into the corridor, where the light revealed faint swaths of pastel now softened by time. Each stripe seemed to glow with promise. As they descended the staircase, Mrs. Francis appeared, carrying a basket of fresh eggs and trays of buttered wheaten scones. "Good morning, mesdames," she greeted, placing the provisions on the kitchen sideboard. "I have arranged for a courtesy fire in the chapel, and the children will arrive shortly." Emily smiled. "Thank you, Mrs. Francis. Would you kindly see to the hearth while Eleanor and I welcome our visitors?" Moments later, the chapel door opened to reveal a handful of villagers, bundled warmly yet eager for the season's first light service. Candles flickered within, and the wooden pews gleamed as Eleanor closed the door behind the last guest. The pale hymn, "Morning Has Broken," filled the sanctuary, led by a small chorus of schoolchildren whose voices rang clear amid stone walls. After the short service, the congregation spilled into the sunshine, just beyond the chapel door. Emily distributed sprigs of lily of the valley she had gathered at dawn, encouraging each neighbor to place one in their homes. "For sweetness in every room," she explained. Eleanor greeted Mr. Lancaster, who had arrived to inspect the corridor. "Repairs. The painter reports only minor touch-ups needed," he said, scanning the soft stripes. "Your home grows lovelier with each season." As the visitors dispersed, the sisters made their way through the garden toward the schoolyard. There, the saplings stood in neat rows, slender and pale against the soft green of new grass. Emily knelt beside the strongest young oak, brushing away last winter's dried leaves. "See how its buds are swelling," she said, plucking one gently and holding it to the light. Eleanor crouched beside her, examining the maples. "Yes, by Michaelmas, these will bear leaves thick enough for shade. Soon our pupils can study." Beneath their branches, Emily rose, brushing her skirts. "Next, we must plan the spring equinox luncheon. I propose we seat guests at long trestle tables beneath the pergola, decorated with garlands of primroses, crocuses, and early daffodils." Eleanor smiled. "And Mrs. Francis's strawberry tarts will be the perfect accompaniment." They linked arms and strolled toward the manor, discussing seating plans and menu elaborations as though composing music. Inside, the morning room buzzed with activity. Miss Turner laid out pressed flowers and placed cards on a long oak table. "Mesdames, all is prepared except the final engraving of the menu placards," she reported. Emily examined one. Spring's first fruits, asparagus tart, new potato, salad, and honeyed strawberries. She beamed. "Perfect. Each menu will be tied with a pale green ribbon to echo our corridor stripes." Eleanor glanced at the corridor through the window. It will feel as though the house itself celebrates. With us. She paused, then added thoughtfully, Emily, have you considered how we might commemorate the anniversary of Lady Augusta's birth? It falls next month. Emily's eyes lit up. A memorial lecture in the chapel, perhaps on her philanthropic vision, and then tea in the gardens? Eleanor nodded. Yes, and we could invite trustees of the school fund to speak, ensuring her legacy guides future governance. That afternoon, the sisters toured the East Wing, inspecting the sealed storeroom doors they had opened months earlier. Emily pressed, her palm against the smooth wood. Who would have thought that behind here lay our family's hidden lives? She murmured. Eleanor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Yet those hidden stories led us to rediscover one another. Our past need not remain concealed, so long as it guides our future. As twilight approached, the two stood once more in the corridor of welcome. Candle sconces cast gentle pools of light along the stripes, now symbols of seasons past and seasons to come. Outside, the faint shrill of returning larks heralded evening, and the first purple shadows of dusk curled around the windows. Eleanor turned to her sister. Tomorrow, we finalize the luncheon. And the day after, the lecture. Already our calendar fills with bright events, a testament to our shared purpose. Emily smiled, her gaze drifting along the corridor's length. Indeed, sister. From the stillness of winter's vigil to the stir of spring's promise, our journey carries onward. Together, Emily and Eleanor left the corridor, stepping into the soft glow of Sedberry House's lamps, its stripes no longer barriers, but pathways to growth, community, and the enduring light of hope. Chapter 18. The full circle of stripes early. Morning mist curled around Sedberry House like a whispered secret, yet within its walls a warm certainty prevailed. The day had arrived at last, the final chapter of the project of springs, a culmination of all Emily and Eleanor Pendlebury had set in motion. Today's gathering would bring not only friends and neighbors, but distant kin and scholars to witness how a hidden past had blossomed into a hopeful future. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings, summoned by an urgent telegram, arrived just after dawn. Hastings stepped out of the carriage first, stretching and smiling at the familiar facade. "It never looks the same twice," he remarked, brushing snowflakes from his coat. Poirot followed, his keen eyes taking in the soft pastel corridor. Glimpsed through the sash window. "Ah, mon ami, see how those stripes now bear light rather than shadow," he said, pressing a hand to the pane. Inside, Emily oversaw the final touches in the corridor, rows of potted primroses and crocuses, aligned beneath the lamps, their petals bright against the gentle pistachio and mint bands. Eleanor coordinated with Mr. Lancaster, who adjusted a small lectern draped in ivory linen at the corridor's far end. A brass plaque beneath the podium read, "Here we honor the past to cultivate tomorrow." As the guests began to assemble, Eleanor greeted them at the chapel door. Fresh candles glowed atop the restored altar, and the silver swallow brooch gleamed beneath the shaft of morning light. Emily welcomed schoolchildren, each clutching a pressed violet, while Hastings and Poirot took their places in the front pews. At precisely 10 o'clock, the procession formed, and Eleanor stepped to the lectern. Her voice rang clear. "Dear friends, today we conclude the journey begun in these very halls, where striped walls once hid love and loss. Yet those same walls have guided us to unity, to purpose, and to this moment." She gestured gently. "To the corridor beyond. Beyond these doors lie the corridor of welcome, the school's laughter, and the promise of seasons to come." Emily rose to join her sister. "We thank you for your faith in this house and in us." Lady Augusta Pendlebury's vision was that her inheritance would serve not just her heirs, but all whose lives it touched. Through schools and shelters, harvests and vigils, you have upheld that vision. She paused, glancing at Poirot. "And To our extraordinary guests, Monsieur Poirot and Captain Hastings, we owe our deepest gratitude. Your wisdom revealed our hidden truths and set us free. Laughter and applause followed, but the sisters were not yet done. Poirot rose, his silver snuff-box in hand. "Madame Pendlebury," he said, addressing Eleanor, "you have mastered the most delicate of puzzles, the mysteries of the human heart. May your legacy endure in every corridor, classroom, and kind gesture." He opened the box, revealing not snuff, but a slender key engraved with the Pendlebury crest. "This key," he continued, "opens the storeroom where your grandmother's secrets lay buried. I entrust it to you, so that no panel in this house shall remain locked against the light." Eleanor accepted it with trembling fingers. "Thank you, monsieur. With this we shall transform those rooms into archives and libraries, places of learning rather than concealment." Emily smiled, slipping the key into her sister's pocket. The final ceremony took place in the corridor of welcome, where a new plaque was unveiled. "Let no secret divide. Let all truth unite." As guests filed through to admire it, spring sunlight filtered through the windows, casting pastel shards across eager faces. Later, under the ancient oak before the manor, the gathering paused for a blessing from the local vicar, followed by a communal tea of honey cakes and rosewater scones. Children danced in the grass. Mrs. Francis distributed candied violets, and Miss Turner led a chorus of school hymns. Even Mr. Lancaster found himself caught up in the laughter, tipping his hat to passers-by. Day's end. Emily and Eleanor stood on the terrace, watching the last of the guests depart down the winding drive. The corridor windows gleamed behind them. Eleanor turned to her sister, eyes bright. "We have come truly full circle from fear to faith, from concealment to celebration." Emily nodded, laying a hand on her sister's arm. "And every stripe has told its story." A carriage awaited Poirot and Hastings. Before boarding, Hastings clasped Emily's hand. "You have built something remarkable here," he said. "I shall think of Sedberry House whenever I see stripes and spring flowers." Together, Poirot bowed to both sisters, then to the corridor. "Adieu, mesdames. May your organization of love, as I once called it, flourish for generations." He tucked the key into his waistcoat pocket, an echo of the legacy he had helped uncover. As the carriage rolled away, Emily and Eleanor watched until its dust settled. The evening sky blushed pink behind the oaks. The sisters turned, crossed the threshold into their home, and walked beneath the gentle stripes, no longer silent sentries, but living ribbons guiding each step toward hope, compassion, and the enduring promise of tomorrow.